All right. Next question I got for you is this is about your specialty. And we're all excited to know what your specialty is, what you're good at, or you're passionate about. So I want to know what makes you want to help Latinos with intergenerational trauma and inner child work and college students and professionals with ADD/ADHD. Take it away for us.
Yeah, so I am a Latina, first generation, and so I am very motivated and passionate to help other Latinos as well. And not just Latinos, but anybody that has a special situation or circumstance that I could definitely understand, the struggles and, me coming from parents that were immigrants. I know some of the struggles that people go through. And I've been specializing in that since I started my career. So I did work with that particular population when I started my career as a therapist, and I worked with a lot of Spanish speaking clients, and I really learned a lot from them and their struggles and what they go through, and a lot of the intergenerational trauma that they have. So I've been able to help them quite a bit, and it's definitely become a passion for me to help change the intergenerational trauma. One of the things I tell my clients is just because that's what you learned or that's what was passed on to you doesn't mean you have to keep passing it on to your kids and their kids and so on. We could change it. We could make a difference. And that's what I really love, that I could show other people how to make a difference. And so that is one of the things, one of the specialties that I focus on with some of my Latino clients and BIPOC populations. And the same with inner child work as well. Um, I do believe that sometimes we do have to go deeper with our traumas and inner child work, especially with Latinos. That there tends to be a lot of trauma from childhood that has not been resolved and healed. So it's important to dive deeper and do that inner child work to be a better person, and change some of the things that have not been healed thus far.
For sure, that is great. I know that you have one more population, but I'm really curious before we move on to the college students here. Uh, is there anything that you can relate to or not relate to when it comes to trauma, Latinos with trauma? You can share as much as if you feel comfortable with. Mm.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. Like I said, my parents are immigrants, and
Yeah.
so I have a lot of family that also immigrated to the United States, and just seeing a lot of their struggles. Um, and one of the things that I focus on right now, it's something I do on the side, but I do trainings for therapists,
Yes.
and especially with learning the culture of Spanish speaking populations and how to speak Spanish to clients. And one of the things we focus on is pre-trauma, because a lot of people think that when they come to the U.S. is when the trauma happens or started, but that's not necessarily true. You got to think about what clients went through before they even got here. What's motivating them to even come to this new country, and a lot of the times they have trauma already, so we call that pre-trauma. So that's something that I myself have encountered not only with my family but with my clients, and then the trauma that they go through, to come to the US, whatever, however they got here. A lot of the times they do have trauma with that, leaving family behind, being separated, and then we have the post trauma, right? Then we have struggling to make ends meet, then trying to fit in and adapt to a new environment and new cultures. And there's a lot of trauma also with that, especially with, which I'm going to go into the next specialty, is college students.
Yeah.
So children, adolescents, and young adults, going into the new the transition of new things, the cultures and how things are different. Even if they, the client was born here, their parents might be different, or their family might have different values and different beliefs. And then it's difficult because then their families, their parents might not understand them. So then they go through different perspectives and different views, and then they have challenges. And that's where depression comes from. That's where anxiety comes from a lot of the times with college students. It's not the academics alone. It has to do more what's around them, what's happening, adapting. And the differences of being away from home, if they're living on campus, if they're living in another state or city, and then also the like I mentioned, the differences in beliefs from their families, and that's usually where a lot of the stressors come from.
I got it. Wow, that's very thorough. Thanks so much. And I just learned something new, pre-trauma. I think we need to use that word more, right? Because especially for immigrants, we don't think about, okay, once they get here, they have to fit in, they have to transition, they have to make ends meet. But then what about before? Many of the traumas before that's been neglected by a lot of American
Yes.
culture, right? They don't talk about it, they don't know about it. That is great. And you mentioned, I want to ask you about what are the greatest challenge working with these Latinos with intergenerational trauma and inner child work? What's the greatest challenge for as a therapist in the session? Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge is that clients, and I can relate to that, by the way, is that it's not them, it's their families.
Okay.
It's their families that are not changing, right? So there's a lot of stigma around mental health, especially with a lot of other cultures and other ethnicities, right? Not just the Spanish speaking populations. And so when their families don't believe in mental health, and the client is coming and they want to better themselves and they do believe in mental health, there's a struggle there, right? Because they want to get better, but then they obviously are living in that environment and they get pushback from their families. And so a lot of the times we can't really get to the real work of the trauma or intergenerational trauma work because we're still working on how they're being affected in their day-to-day lives by their families. And so
Yes.
I think that's the biggest challenge I encounter.
That's really good detail, really good point that people that we don't really know about, people don't work with this population. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being vulnerable as well about your own trauma in general. And then I don't think you mentioned about ADD/ADHD,
Yes.
but those individuals. Tell me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also another specialty that I'm very passionate about. And I do self-disclose to my clients all the time. I grew up with ADHD, not knowing it, and so I was an adult. So I do get a lot of clients that also have gone through, especially like I mentioned, with a lot of Latinos and other cultures where there's stigmas with mental health
Yeah.
and their parents don't believe, or their family members or guardians don't believe in mental health, so they don't think they even had a problem, and so they don't get diagnosed, they don't get the help, and so now as adults they're having problems. And so I do help a lot of adults with ADHD, ADD, in addition to children and adolescents, because it's an area that I've spent a lot of time focusing on and getting training on and working with them.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I do tell clients that there is hope. Don't just because you're an adult, doesn't mean that you can't get better. You definitely can. It
Yeah.
just means that you have to work at it. It's
Yeah.
persistence, it's
Yeah.
getting the help. And I do work with a lot of professionals that have ADHD and ADD, and they do get better little by little.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Thanks for all this information, Dr. Christine.